You ever get that feeling like something in your life is finally clicking into place, and then, in a single evening, someone decides to try and take it away? That's how my story starts, with me parking a car I'd worked like hell for, right under a lamppost that used to belong to someone else's garage sale dream, and thinking, finally this is mine. My name's Evan Hayes. I'm not a show-off. I'm just the kind of guy who likes to know when the work you put in actually turned into something that can't be walked over. I'd moved into Cedar Hollow because I wanted quiet, because the yard had oak trees and the kind of fence that creaks in a way that makes you feel like you're in a proper neighborhood, not just a row of houses pretending to be a community. I bought a midnight charcoal Aston DB Zaya. Ridiculous, I know, but to me it was a milestone, a proof I could still surprise myself. The first night I pulled in, I rinsed off the grime, walked around it like a proud dad maybe shouldn't, and told myself to sleep easy. 3 days later, there was a note tucked beneath the windshield wiper that smelled faintly of lemon oil, and something else, something like a warning. The note didn't say much, just a line about community standards and consequences, signed with initials and a flourish. That flourish belonged to a woman named Gloria Vance, HOA president. Hair like a news anchor, smile that could get you a permit or a parking ticket depending on the day. I didn't think much of it at first, until I found Tommy Ruiz. Tommy was the kind of man who treated municipal ordinances like scripture. He wore a neon vest sometimes, a badge that looked official enough if you squinted, and a swagger born of small-town authority. He'd been the security guard turned self-appointed enforcer. Gloria gave him the nod in meetings, and he took the nod for a license. He watched me the way someone watches a chessboard, calculating, impatient, waiting for a move that didn't belong to me. The night the car was vandalized, somebody went too far. I found the Aston in the morning like something from a slow-motion nightmare. One window spiderwebbed, one tire shredded, the hood marked with deep, sloppy gouges. The thing about seeing violence to property is it's so intimate, like someone reached into your living room and rearranged your memories. I remember stepping back, the air thick, my hands smelling like engine oil and disbelief, and then anger folding into a kind of cold, methodical thinking. Denise from next door knocked that morning, hair in a towel, eyes wide. I saw Gloria and Tommy. They were out here late, she said. Tommy was talking to someone from landscaping, and Gloria was at the edge of the drive, like she was making sure someone did what they were told. Hearing that, part of me wanted to storm the gate, scream, do something unbelievably cathartic, but the other part of me, call it survival, said get proof, get it clean, get it legal. I'd learned the hard way that righteous rage without evidence usually ends up in viral shame and no resolution. So I did the quiet, boring thing, check the porch cam. There it was, grainy footage, time-stamped, an awkward tango of guilt. Tommy, in that neon vest, walking around the Aston, then slamming a wrench against the tire, laughing once like it was a joke. Gloria leaning in from the shadows, whispering, handing something, a glove, a tool. I couldn't tell to Tommy before she retreated. The footage didn't show a weapon, but it showed intent, it showed coordination, it showed faces. Proof is a strange remedy. It doesn't soothe the gut, but it gives you leverage. You can act like a person with rights instead of a man fueled by outrage. I went to the police. I handed them the file and felt like a man turning in the world's smallest badge. The officers were professional, which mattered. They asked the right questions and did the right things, and for the first time in 36 hours I slept without imagining every rustle was a plot to scare me out of my home. But news travels fast in places like Cedar Hollow, and that night Gloria called an emergency HOA meeting with the kind of polished panic only a practiced politician can muster. The meeting smelled like lemon-scented hand soap and defensive contracts. Gloria moved through the room like she'd already written the script. Deny, deflect, point to community well-being. Tommy stood behind her, the kind of presence that fills the space between a man and a mask, and when I played the footage in front of the board, the room tilted. People who'd nodded politely at Gloria for years shifted in their chairs. They trusted her guidance, her ability to keep property values up, to enforce the little rules that keep neighborhood pictures perfect. But viewing the footage was like pulling a curtain. Gloria's expression faltered, and Tommy's jaw tightened in a way that said more than his words could. That's when Tommy finally spoke. He stepped forward and tried the old trick, call me unstable, make the victim the villain. You don't know what you're seeing, he told me, voice low. We were enforcing community codes. He smirked and added, "You better watch yourself around here, Evan. This neighborhood runs on respect." There it was, thinly veiled, the kind of threat that implies worse things if you keep poking. He didn't pull a gun, didn't need to, but the way his hand brushed the belt of his vest said plenty. People watched. Some flinched. Others clung to the version of events they'd built on shiny HOA newsletters and potluck photos. I could have taken a baseball bat and found a dark, satisfying revenge, believe me. The imagination serves you well in those first hot hours, but the thing about being on the receiving end of a wrong is you discover quickly what you're willing to become to fix it. I wasn't willing to become a headline. I wasn't willing to prove a point by lowering myself. I wanted accountability, not chaos. So I handed everything to my attorney, to the police. I pressed charges for vandalism and for impersonation. Tommy wasn't a cop, but he'd been presenting himself as something more authoritative than a power-tripping neighbor. The state does slow work. It's sometimes infuriating, but there's a rhythm to it that sorts truth from rumor if you let it breathe. The arrest was one of those surreal community moments, the kind that looks smaller on camera than it feels in the driveway. Officers in uniform, the click of cuffs, Tommy's face doing that split-second thing where his bravado and panic both try to take the floor. Gloria tried to pull rank, to frame it as an overreach, but the footage was stubborn, clearer than any campaign speech. Neighbors stood on porches, phones up, whispering into the mesh between sympathy and schadenfreude. You could hear the neighborhood exhale, like someone finally unlocking a window that's been stuck for too long. Court gave the story real edges. It's strange how cold a courtroom can make something that once felt hot as grief. It sharpens things into a narrative that a judge and a jury can weigh. Evidence, witnesses, a catalog of small cruelties packaged as community maintenance. Tommy got charged vandalism, impersonation, a string of misdemeanors that add up when you've decided to play sheriff without a badge. Gloria lost her grip on the board. Petitions rolled through Cedar Hollow like a winter storm. Neighbors who'd been quiet for years finally putting pens to paper. People don't often take on institutions if they think the institution is untouchable, but institutions get brittle when the people inside them start believing their own mythology. At the end of it, Tommy was ordered to pay restitution, to help cover repairs, to take community service, things that sound small next to life, and yet, for me, felt like a line drawn. He lost a lot more than that: social standing, access to the unofficial levers of power that had made him feel big in a small world. Gloria moved away a few months later, claimed it was for family reasons, but the truth was more prosaic. You can't run a village on paper when the villagers stop believing your pen. I didn't throw a victory party. The Aston I drove out of Cedar Hollow months later was different, not just because it was repaired or because the paint now shone without the scars, but because the man who drove it had changed. I learned about the cost of proof and the cost of restraint. I learned how quickly a community can turn protective or predatory, depending on who steers the story. I learned that sometimes justice is a quiet thing. It comes in paperwork, in clerks' signatures, in the slow removal of a name from a board roster, and not in the catharsis social feeds promise. The ending I'll give you is messy, and that's on purpose. Tommy did his time, paid what he could, but the social debts lingered: comments, rumors, pockets of people who still said he was just doing his job. Gloria's fans were louder than her critics had been while she led, and Cedar Hollow found new battles. Who gets to flag the rules? How much power does a board really need? What happens when neighbors decide the line between order and cruelty is too thin? I drive past the Oaks sometimes, windows down, the Aston purring like a thing that's learned to forgive noise, and I wonder how many neighborhoods are a few bad notes away from discord. So here's what I want from you: tell me what you would have done. Was I a coward for not swinging back? Was I brave to let the law handle it? Do you think Gloria was always dangerous? Or was she pushed into bad decisions by people like Tommy? Drop your take in the comments. Tell me if you think the HOA had any right to act like judge and jury, and if you've ever seen power dressed up in a neon vest. Share this with someone who loves small-town melodrama or complex neighborhood politics, because I want to know, are we better off letting systems correct themselves, or do communities need to get louder to keep those systems honest?